Krystal Ball appeared on the Real Time with Bill Maher show this week. Many in the online left world were very much anticipating that. She was on his show a few years ago during the 2020 primary when he, of course, wanted Amy Klobuchar for the nominee, and she sort of let out an involuntary sort of chuckle. And that sort of went viral. And so we were looking forward to her coming back on. And they got into a whole bunch of stuff. January 6th, inflation, all sorts of topics. So we could actually play her entire session on the Maher show. We don't have time for that. And we would get copyright claims up our peaches if we did that, so we're not going to. But we're going to play a brief 2-minute clip here on inflation and the supposed causes of inflation.
The economy, there's way too much government spending, and that's why we have inflation. So that's a large part of that. It's just basic economics. And
that is not basic economics. We had this thing called a pandemic. We had a supply chain crisis. And by the way, there's a war in Ukraine.
It played a role.
So to act like the only reason we have problems now is because people got a little bit of money in their bank account is just not honest.
And a little bit of money, they got more than we spent in World War II. So don't act like...
Hold on.
Don't act like... You said don't act. Don't act like we had to react to the pandemic exactly the way we did. We had to spend $6 trillion.
Okay, but how about the trillions that the Federal Reserve shot at Wall Street? For some reason, people don't get upset about that.
How much? What'd you say?
Fueled the trillions of dollars the Federal Reserve shot at Wall Street to backstop the stock market and the bond market. No one gets upset about that, even though that was a massive
I don't know what
factor in
you're
inflation.
talking about. What do you mean shot at Wall Street?
Well,
when are we talking about?
We're talking about buying assets, buying stocks, buying bonds, buying treasury bills so that they expand the balance sheet. This is during the crisis, the coronavirus crisis. When the stock market crashed, that is what the Fed did. They went into action. They shot trillions of dollars.
But the stock market didn't crash during COVID.
Now it's crashing. It's crashing now.
It crashed, and the Fed came in and backstopped it. That's what happened.
It crashed, and we never heard about it?
No, it crashed. Go back and look at it. It fell off a cliff.
When?
The Treasury bond market stopped functioning, and the Fed took extraordinary action. It's never taken in history.
I don't
Somehow
remember
no one
that.
gets upset.
Maybe the first week of the
Somehow nobody gets upset about the rich people who got tons of money and tons of support, way more than working class people did.
Sure
but
they do.
My God, people were able to feed their kids and they had a little bit of money in their bank accounts. It was the worst thing in the world.
No.
That is one small part of the inflation story, and is, by the way, not the only thing that we can deal with to get out of this mess.
Where to start? I think where I'll start, and then I'll toss this over to you guys regarding the stock market crash. Did it crash? Did it not crash? Right? And I'll pull up a graphic while you guys are talking about that. They talk about inflation as a result of giving basically people too much handouts. That's basically what Bill Maher and whoever the other guest is there were saying. Then Bill Maher throws out this $6 trillion.
Well, they should get about the business of dying and cut down on the surplus population.
He goes into this $6 trillion figure. They got $6 trillion. We didn't have to spend $6 trillion. He doesn't explicitly claim that ordinary people were the recipients of that $6 trillion, but just listening to that conversation, if you didn't know better, you would certainly think that's what he's saying. He's saying people got too much money, and then he mentions we gave $6 trillion away. The CARES Act passed in whatever it was, March or April, a few weeks after the lockdown, gave $4.5 trillion to corporations as bailouts. Zach Carter from the Huffington Post wrote pretty much the definitive article on that when it came out. It went everywhere, and he was kind enough to actually give me an interview, so I interviewed him right when that article came out, and he laid it all out. $4.5 trillion in corporate bailouts. That was a supply-side bailout. That did not go to the ordinary people. The ordinary people got whatever that first round of checks was, and then some of them got sort of add-ons to their unemployment if they were out of work. That's all ordinary people got. And notice, inflation did not set in right away. It wasn't until demand came back that we had inflation. Basic laws, supply, demand, right? Inflation occurs when demand grows faster than supply. If I have 5 gold watches that I'm looking to sell and there's only one interested buyer, if I want to sell all 5 of those watches, I'm going to have to give that one guy a great price, which lowers the price per watch. If I'm looking to sell 5 watches and I got 10 interested buyers, high demand means I'm going to be able to drive up the price and cause bidding wars between all these buyers, right? Pretty simple. COVID hits, supply and demand both tank. And yes, the stock market tanks, which we'll get into in a second when I toss it to you guys.
That's
right?
amazing to me that he didn't have
Absolutely
no
amazing
memory
he
of
did
that.
not know that. Anyway, supply, demand, tank. Now, what happens is once people got vaccines in their arms and were able to resume life relatively normally, demand shoots up much faster than supply can keep up because it's not easy for all these businesses to restart operations as fast as it takes people to get shots in their arms and get back out to living their lives. So that's part of the reason why you have inflation, because you had demand skyrocket and supply struggle to keep up with that. And by the way, struggle to keep up with that is giving the suppliers the benefit of the doubt, because in many cases, the suppliers, corporations, oil companies, whoever, they think, well, why should we bust our asses increasing our supply when we can simply mark up the price of the products, right? Rather than go through the arduous task of restarting the operation, getting it back up to scale, hiring more people, re-expanding, reopening, blah, blah, blah. Let's just work with the supply we have and charge people double or triple the price for that is the main driver of inflation, and it has fuck all to do with ordinary people getting a one-time stimulus check of $1,200, whatever the fuck it was. So it's completely fucking insane. Just economically illiterate to act as if those payments are the main driver of inflation. Of course, it's something, right? It adds to it a little bit, just like the Russia-Ukraine war adds to it quite a bit, right? It's multifaceted. I'm not saying it has nothing to do with it. But it is just completely ignorant to put out there that we have inflation right now because of the money that was handed out during COVID. It makes no sense. Just chronologically, it makes no sense. The money was handed out 2 years ago. There was no inflation until there was increased demand. There was increased demand when things opened back up, when the vaccines came out. So anyway, that's my part of it. Now, you guys want to get into the stock market stuff, because that's just astoundingly ignorant also, and I'm glad Krystal took him to task on that.
That is amazing that he did not know that, because it was like the story of the year, that there was this stock market crash and then the Fed injected so much money into the markets that the market went off the hook and hit new highs in the middle of a pandemic. Like, this is what I don't understand.
And that Fed, by the way, that was part of the $4.5 trillion that we're talking about.
Conversation. I don't understand that. I'm sure he did monologues about the meme stocks. Like, did he only catch that part and not what led into it? It's pretty amazing.
He wasn't on the air though during those early months of the pandemic.
That's right, he wasn't.
He came back. He was doing it out of his house, but that was
I'm almost positive he covered the meme stocks. Like, he was on the air while that was still going on.
Okay.
Well, here. Can everybody see what I'm sharing to the screen now?
Yeah.
All right. You see that cliff there?
Yeah.
Let's check the date on that. Looks like that was mid-March 2020, right after the lockdowns began. That's what you call a crash. If that is not a crash, I don't know what is. You want to get semantical about it and say it was a crash that was quickly recovered from because of the Fed pumping all that money into the market with the CARES Act. Right. You could say that. So it wasn't a crash that lasted very long, which is probably why it wasn't perceived as a crash by people like Bill Maher. But it was certainly a crash. It was certainly a dramatic tanking of the market that, as Krystal Ball points out, then recovered from artificially by the Fed pumping all this money. That's what was her point.
Dude, I was trading at the time. Fucking Hertz, Avis, these fucking companies, these were trading at like $5 or $6. Like, Six Flags was trading at like $5. I mean, that's, to put that in perspective, a normal range for those would be about $50, about $50 stocks. Same with everything, the auto companies, everything. Even though it did come back up like that, a lot of the markets stayed, things that they didn't know when a vaccine was coming. So anything that was related to normal life was getting killed. Like, that spike was the lockdown plays. It was Netflix. It was Amazon. It was UPS. Those were all the things that spiked the market like that. Other things, airlines, I mean, anything like that, cruise lines was just destroyed. I have always been skeptical of modern monetary theory. There's never been a country that tried to money print its way out of problems that didn't wind up running into hyperinflation. We have, I believe the number is 60% of the dollars in circulation were printed in the last 10 years. I believe it's 60%. Yeah, man, I'm not going to say that's not part of inflation. What Maher is getting wrong is doing what the elite class always does. He's dumping it on the crumbs that the working people got, and not looking at the trillions of dollars that went into corporations and Wall Street and the bond market. That's where most of this money, this printed money, went.
Yes, and if that $4.5 trillion,
not to people.
If that $4.5 trillion was handled responsibly, you would think we wouldn't be in the supply chain crisis that we are right now, which means you wouldn't have the inflation that we have right now, right? I mean, you would think that could have been mitigated, right? But it wasn't. Well, it was also, a blank check.
If you look at how people spent the money, it wasn't really in a way that would be inflationary. They were pretty fucking responsible with it, because you can see that in the fact that credit card debt was at an all-time low.
And savings went up.
People didn't just go out and buy a Cadillac. They paid off their fucking credit cards. Americans are broke. They saw a chance to get out of revolving debt that they've been carrying for years. I did that. The money that I got, I wiped out my credit card debts, and I've kept them at zero ever since to not get back into that trap. Now, I'm lucky. I don't have kids here. I don't have a lot of the expenses other Americans have. I live in New York. I don't drive a car. I don't have gas prices. I don't own a house. I'm not paying an oil bill. I didn't have to charge my cards back up. Once I got them wiped out, I was able to keep them that way.
Right.
Now they're up above where they were pre-pandemic.
Right.
Because for the same reason they had that credit card debt before, because their underlying economic problem that led them into that debt didn't get solved. It didn't get solved by a few stimulus checks. It gave them a moment of reprieve, and now they're broken in debt again. Now America's broken in debt again.
Yeah. Ian asks, didn't people get far more than $1,200 in relief from COVID? I think the first payment was $1,200, whatever it was. Let's say everybody got $4,000 from COVID. The last stimulus payment went out, what? Early 2021? It's been a year. The fact is we did not see inflation until demand went back up. Demand went back up not because of the $4,000 that people received from 2020 to 2021. If it was even that, and it wasn't that. It was something like 20 something. I don't even remember what it was. It was about 2,000 or something like that. Whatever it was, that's not significant, because the fact of the matter is,
we got the 12, we got the 14, and then we got the 600 to top it to 2,000.
Right.
And those were all the stimulus, right? That was all the stimulus checks.
Okay, so let's say 2,000, big round number. That was a year ago. Inflation did not look. The bottom line is, you don't have inflation unless demand spikes at a rate that supply either cannot or will not, for whatever reason, keep up with. That's what's happening now. That's why you have inflation now. And
all right, Ian is asking, does the fact that people's savings went up mean they were given more than necessary to get through the pandemic? You know, some people, but their savings are wiped out again now. So apparently not.
It wasn't enough because credit card debt is back up now.
Right, because there's the underlying economic conditions were not solved. Now, look, I will give Biden some small credit with Build Back Better. He did propose some structural fixes to the U.S. economy, like childcare.
Sure.
Which, looking back on COVID, when we get enough distance from it, somebody really is going to have to write a book about the class divide in how people thought about COVID. Because I think one of the most disgusting things I saw during COVID were the way that people who could work from home beat up on people who didn't want the schools closed, as if they were fucking ignorant savages. No, we don't have childcare in this country. What do you want? What do you want these people to do? The schools are most people's daycare. They can't afford daycare, and most people can't work from home. They don't have those kinds of jobs.
Yeah, and look, I just had to add one more point before we move on to the next topic. When it comes to, I mean, this also ties into the "no one wants to work" meme, right? That whole thing, that CARES Act, as part, there were very few and very minor strings attached to getting that $4.5 trillion in money that we basically just gave to corporations. One of them is that they could only lay off up to 10% of their workforce for 6 months. After that, they could do whatever the hell they wanted. Keep the money. Do whatever you want after 6 months. Right. And so a lot of these corporations that downsized because obviously COVID was in no way, shape, or form solved after 6 months. It's really not totally solved now, even, obviously. Right. They were able to downsize. And now they're having a tough time getting workers back because they're not willing to pay them what they would need. And so they're figuring it's most profitable for them to keep their supply numbers where they're at and just charge out the ass for goods. That's why that's mainly why you have inflation. Now, of course, this Russia-Ukraine bullshit is exacerbating that, and that's on Biden, in my opinion, right? There are other factors. I'm not saying that giving people money doesn't factor into that somewhat at some point, because that's demand side economics, and increasing demand, there's always a risk of inflation when you increase demand. But when you look at how much money was funneled into the demand side versus the gargantuan amount of money that was funneled into the supply side, it makes no economic sense whatsoever that could be the main driver of inflation. That is economic illiteracy to contend that.
Well, the reason that now you're seeing a lot of predictions of gloom, including from Michael Burry, the Big Short guy who called the collapse of the housing market. A lot of people are saying that the day that has long been predicted, when the Fed is out of bullets and really can no longer do anything to juice the economy anymore, that day is here, because now they're facing runaway inflation. So they can't possibly do anything to stimulate the economy. The economy crashes now. What are they going to do?
Right. Because at this point, to juice demand any further without getting really tough with these corporations, I mean, that's what you'd have to do. You'd have to threaten these oil companies, hey, listen, you're going to produce at a certain level, or else we're taking your tax credits and your tax breaks and your subsidies away. You're going to have to start meeting minimum thresholds of refining, production, exporting, if you want to keep this sweet deal that you have going. And they probably have to do that in other sectors also. But of course, we don't have a president who's willing to do that. We have a machine politics, just George Clooney from Up in the Air. He's the sad bastard sent on behalf of the company to tell you how fucked you are. That's who's running the country. And that's why he's so unpopular.
Please clap.